Finally someone said it. Finally someone found the words. For the thing you have been carrying your entire life without knowing what to call it. So stay with me. Every single word of this message was meant for you. You have died before, not in a hospital, not in an accident, not in a way that showed up on any medical record, but you have died inside, completely. There was a version of you that no longer exists, a version that was ended by something so painful, so devastating, so completely world-collapsing that the person who emerged on the other side was not the same person who walked in. You remember the before, and you remember the after, and you know deep in your bones that those two people are not the same. The before you believed differently, saw differently, felt differently, moved through the world differently, and then something happened. The before you died. And what rose up in its place, what you have been living in ever since, is something that cannot be explained by anything ordinary. Because here is what no one around you understood. Here is what even you may not have fully grasped until now. When a chosen one truly dies on the inside, something occurs that does not happen for everyone. The veil lifts. The layer that separates the seen from the unseen, the surface from the deep, the ordinary from the spiritual, it gets thin. So thin you can almost see through it. And suddenly you begin to notice things other people cannot notice. You feel things other people cannot feel. You know things that have no logical explanation. You see people not just for who they present themselves to be, but for who they actually are, their intentions, their energy, their truth, even when they are performing something else entirely. And the people around you began to sense it. They could not name it. They simply knew. Something about you was different. Something about you sees more than you should be able to see, knows more than you should be able to know, feels more than any ordinary person should be able to feel. And they were right, because you are not who you were before. You are what rose from the death of who you used to be. And what rose is something altogether different, something altogether more. Let me take you back to the death. I need you to revisit it, not to relive the pain, but to understand what actually happened there. Because most chosen ones spend years trying to make sense of the thing that shattered them, trying to understand why it had to be that painful, why God allowed something so devastating to reach their life. I want to answer that today, not with a comforting phrase, not with a polished quote, with the actual truth. The death had to happen, because the person you were before could not carry what you were created to carry. The before you, as genuine as they were, as kind, as full of potential, was not built for the level of purpose assigned to your life. They were too easily influenced, too dependent on external approval, too trusting of the wrong people, too afraid of the wrong things, too comfortable in spaces that were always too small, willing to shrink to make others comfortable. And God needed a version of you that could stand where you will be required to stand, a version that could not be shaken by what would have collapsed the before you, a version that could discern what the before you would have missed, a version that could carry what the before you would have dropped. And the only path from that version to this version was the death, the fire, the breaking, the thing that felt like the end, but was actually the beginning of the truest version of you. I want to explain what the veil actually is, because this matters deeply, and I want you to understand it beyond just a sensation. The veil is the membrane between the natural and the spiritual. It is what most people move through their entire lives, operating behind, seeing only what is directly in front of them, feeling only what is obvious, understanding only what can be explained by logic. Most people spend their entire lives on one side of that veil, safe, comfortable, surface level, and there is nothing wrong with that. But chosen ones, from the moment they are born, are already different. Their veil was always thinner than average. They always felt more, sensed more, picked up on more. But the death, the specific death you endured, did not simply thin the veil, it tore it. And when a veil tears, there is no repairing it. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot return to surface-level existence once you have touched something deeper. That is why life has felt so different ever since. That is why certain conversations, certain relationships, certain environments now feel too shallow, too far from the depth you have already touched. Let me describe 5 specific ways the lifted veil appears in the life of a chosen one. I want you to see yourself in what follows. I want you to recognize that what you have been experiencing is not confusion, not disorder, not imagination. It is your lifted veil operating in your ordinary daily life. The first way it appears is the ability to read people with immediate precision. You walk into a room, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you know who is genuine and who is performing, who means well and who carries an agenda, who is safe and who is a threat, who is hiding pain behind a smile, who is lying even when their words are perfect. And this knowing does not arise from what they said. It comes from something you felt, something in their energy, their eyes, the atmosphere around them. Something your lifted veil allows you to perceive that others simply cannot access. And you have spent years second-guessing this gift, telling yourself you are overthinking, telling yourself to extend benefit of the doubt, telling yourself you are being unfair because they have not technically done anything yet. And then they did. And your knowing had been right the entire time. Stop second-guessing the gift. It was given to you for a specific reason. The second way the lifted veil appears is the weight of other people's pain. You walk into environments and absorb emotions that do not originate in you. You sit beside a stranger and feel their sadness. You enter a room and immediately detect tension that nobody else seems to register. You speak with someone who claims to be fine and feel the ache they are concealing so clearly it almost moves you to tears. For a long time you believed this was a curse, because carrying what does not belong to you is exhausting and disorienting. It makes it difficult to know sometimes where you end and where everyone else begins. But this is not a curse. It is one of the most powerful gifts a human being can carry. The capacity to feel what others feel is the foundation of genuine compassion, genuine healing, genuine connection. It is what makes you the person strangers open up to within 5 minutes of meeting you. The person people call when they are falling apart, because somehow they know you will understand in a way no one else can. That is your lifted veil at work, and the world requires it. The third way the lifted veil appears is in the dreams and the downloads. I know you know exactly what I mean. The dreams that feel more real than waking experience. The ones where information arrives that you could not have known through natural means. The ones where you see things that later occur. The ones where you encounter a presence so powerful you wake changed. And the downloads, those sudden, fully formed thoughts that arrive in your mind from nowhere. The clarity that descends in the middle of a shower or right before sleep. The knowing that drops into your spirit about a situation, a person, a decision, with such precision it could not have come from your own reasoning alone. These are not random occurrences. They are the direct result of a veil thin enough for heaven to communicate through. God speaks to everyone, but he speaks loudest and most clearly to those whose veil has been thinned by fire. You are one of those people. The communication is real. Learn to honor it. The fourth way the lifted veil appears is an almost physical intolerance for anything that is not genuine. After the death, after the veil lifted, you developed a visceral discomfort with pretense in any form. Performative conversations exhaust you. Surface relationships drain you in ways you cannot always articulate. Environments where everyone is performing contentment, pretending to be fine, pretending to have everything managed, feel suffocating rather than social. And people have called you intense for this. Too deep, too serious, too much. But the truth is simpler than that. You have been to a place most people have never visited. You have touched something real, devastatingly real, and it permanently altered your tolerance for anything less. That is not a flaw, it is a filtering system. It removes everything shallow and draws you toward everything true. The relationships, spaces, and conversations that survive that filter are exactly the ones capable of sustaining you for what lies ahead. The fifth way the lifted veil appears is the sense of mission. After the death, most chosen ones wake up carrying a purpose so strong it is almost uncomfortable. Something inside them pushes, refuses to allow them to simply exist, refuses to let them settle for a life misaligned with what they feel called toward. This restlessness, this holy dissatisfaction, is not anxiety. It is assignment. It is the awareness that your life belongs to something beyond your own comfort, that you were placed here with a specific calling, a specific contribution only you can make. And that awareness produces an urgency most people around you do not feel, because they have not been where you have been. They have not died what you died. They have not had the veil torn the way yours was torn. So the urgency can feel lonely, like you are moving faster than those around you, seeing what others cannot yet perceive, trying to build something people do not understand because they cannot feel what is driving you. That is the mission. And it was placed in you precisely because you are the one capable of carrying it. Now, I want to address the part nobody talks about, the loneliness that comes with a lifted veil. Everyone wants to discuss the gifts, the discernment, the sensitivity, the downloads, the mission, but not the loneliness. The particular, specific, bone-deep kind of alone that comes from seeing more than others see, feeling more than others feel, knowing more than others know, and being unable to fully share it because the people around you simply do not have the language for what you are experiencing. You have sat in full rooms and felt completely invisible. You have been in relationships with people who genuinely loved you and still felt unseen, not because they were unkind, but because they were looking at the surface while you were living in the deep. The gap between where they were and where you were was sometimes impossible to bridge, and so you learned to perform normalcy, to compress yourself into a shape that felt manageable to those around you, to conceal the depth so nobody felt overwhelmed, to keep the veil experience private because every time you tried to share it, you received concerned looks, gentle suggestions to see a therapist, or kind dismissals that you were simply overthinking, and eventually you stopped sharing. And the loneliness deepened. I want to speak directly into that loneliness now. You are not alone, and I mean that in the most specific way possible. There are others watching this right now who have walked through the same death, who carry the same lifted veil, who feel the same things, who have sat in those same rooms, feeling that same aloneness. You are not as isolated as you believe. You have simply been in the wrong rooms, around the wrong people, attempting to find depth in places not constructed to hold it. Your people exist. The ones who will not look at you strangely when you describe what you feel. The ones who will not try to talk you out of what you know. The ones who will sit with you in the deep and feel completely at home there. They exist. And as you step more fully into who you are, as you stop shrinking, stop performing, stop presenting a smaller version of yourself, they will find you, or you will find them, because depth calls to depth, and you are deep enough to attract the kind of connection that will genuinely change your life. I also want to talk about the responsibility that accompanies the lifted veil, because with this level of perception comes a weight of responsibility that cannot be set aside. You see what others cannot see, which means you carry a responsibility to speak when others are being deceived. You feel what others cannot feel, which means you carry a responsibility to create spaces where people feel safe enough to feel their own truth. You know what others cannot know, which means you carry a responsibility to place that knowing in service of something greater than yourself. This is not a burden. It is a calling. The gifts of the lifted veil were not given exclusively for your benefit. They were given so your pain could become a bridge for someone else's healing, so your survival could become someone else's reason to hold on. So everything you endured, the death, the fire, the breaking, could be redeemed into something that outlasts your own story. Now, let me speak about how to actually walk in the reality of your lifted veil. Knowing you have it is one thing. Honoring it, protecting it, using it as it was designed, that is another entirely. First, stop apologizing for what you perceive. Your discernment is real. Your sensitivity is real. Your knowing is real. Stop softening them to keep others comfortable. Stop second-guessing them because they do not fit a logical framework. Start trusting them the way you would trust any consistently reliable source of information, because that is exactly what they are. They have been right far more often than you have acknowledged. And in the moments they seem to miss, it was usually because you overrode them with what your mind calculated or what others advised. Trust the veil. It was given to be trusted. Second, protect your energy with genuine intentionality. A lifted veil means you are more permeable than the average person. You absorb more from the environments you enter and the people you encounter. If you are not deliberate about protecting your energy, you will spend most of your life exhausted, carrying what was never yours to carry. Establish rituals of clearing. Protect time alone to process and decompress. Create distance from people and spaces that consistently drain without replenishing. Build boundaries that protect not just your schedule but your spirit, because your spirit is your greatest resource, and a depleted spirit cannot do what it was created to do. Third, use the pain as the message. Every layer of the death, every dimension of the breaking, is content. It is the material of the message you were placed here to carry, not despite the suffering, but because of it. The people you are going to reach will not be reached by someone who has never known genuine devastation. They will be reached by someone who knew the same devastation and survived. Someone who died the same kind of death and rose. Someone whose veil was torn in the same painful way and learned to see through it. Your story is not something to conceal. It is your assignment. The more honestly you own it, the more powerful your impact becomes. Fourth, embrace the separateness. I know you have spent years wishing you were more like everyone else, wishing you could simply relax into surface-level living, wishing the mission would quiet down long enough for you to feel ordinary. But ordinary was never your assignment. You were set apart before you were formed. The separateness is not punishment, it is positioning. You are being held apart from the ordinary, because what you are being prepared for requires someone who is not ordinary. Stop resisting the separateness. Receive it, because it is the very quality that makes you capable of doing what others cannot. Chosen ones, I want to close with this. You have died before, and the death was real. The pain was real. The loss was real. Nobody should diminish that, not even in the name of purpose. You are allowed to grieve the version of yourself that did not survive, the innocence that was taken, the trust that was broken, the lightness that was replaced by something heavier and deeper. Grieve it. Honor it. Let yourself feel what you have never fully allowed yourself to feel. But then, when the grief has had its time, look at what rose. Do not waste it. Do not conceal it. Do not compress it back into something that fits more comfortably into ordinary spaces. Release it fully, completely, without apology. Because you did not survive that death, you did not have the veil lifted. For nothing. You survived for this, for the people who will be reached by what you carry, for the lives that will shift because of the story you hold, for the version of the world that becomes better because you decided to rise and to be exactly, unapologetically, entirely what you were made to be. If this message reached something in the deepest part of you today, share it right now. Someone you know is in the middle of their death at this very moment. They do not yet know that what feels like the end is actually the beginning of the most significant chapter of their life. Be the reason they find out. Comment below and tell me what died in you that made room for who you are becoming. I read every single one. If you are new here, welcome home. You were always meant to find this place. Stay chosen. Stay lifted. Stay risen. Because the world has been waiting for what came out of your fire.